Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm thrilled to welcome to you once more to Keeping It Brief after a little respite over the summer. This is a service of the Bucks County Women's Advocacy Coalition, and I'm your host, Maria Evans. I want to thank AARP, first of all, for sponsoring this episode. As Thomas Jefferson said, a well-informed citizenry is the best defense against tyranny. That comes to mind as we prepared for today's episode of Keeping It Brief. Today, we welcome Dr. Carla Chamberlin, Professor of Applied Linguistics and Communication Arts and Sciences at Penn State Abington College, who will discuss the importance of high-quality public education systems for all members of our community. Let me step back a moment and just remind you that this midweek, midday gathering on Zoom will be your monthly opportunity to get a quick update on important current issues from one of our partners or issue specialists. In this case, of course, education. I want to begin with a quick note about our technology. When you joined the event, your microphone was muted, your camera turned off automatically. While you can see and hear us, nobody can see or hear you. So relax, grab a lunch or a snack, and enjoy today's conversation. If you have a question or comment, though, we want to hear from you. So please type it into the chat box along the bottom of your screen. You'll notice in chat there's a couple action items that you can take related to this topic that you can check out later. We'll check for questions and comments throughout the discussion and address them today or in a follow-up communication if they need more attention. Now a little bit about us. The Bucks County Women's Advocacy Coalition is a nonpartisan coalition of individuals and organizations. We were founded in 2008 and designated as a nonprofit in 2015. We educate and advocate for gender equity and economic security for all. We're thrilled that we can call more than 300 individuals and nearly 50 organizations our partners. By working together, we can speak with one voice and make that voice more powerful as we work towards systemic change. A few notes before we get started on our conversation today. This conversation is being recorded. We'll put the link on it on our website, and our next newsletter will include a link to the recording. So feel free to share. We encourage that. Please do. Please visit our website at bcwac.org for more information about the organization, to read blog posts, including one by Carla that talks about this issue today, and to see opinion pieces from various member organizations and our individual members that have been published worldwide in the USA Today network. You can also track legislation there, sign up to receive emails, so that you know how to contact our elected officials on certain issues. Again, something that's going to happen from today. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. The links are on the website's homepage. Please share and like posts as you see fit. Today's program, like all of our educational programs, is free. While we operate efficiently, we do have some costs. And if you feel like this program and the work of the coalition is of value to you, please consider making a financial contribution. With that out of the way, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Carla Chamberlin. As I said, a professor of applied linguistics and communication arts and sciences at Penn State Abington College. Her research and teaching focus is on the intersection of language, culture, and media. Her recent work explores how media literacy education can be used to teach about social justice and to encourage civic engagement. She served as Associate Editor-in-Chief of the journal Intercultural Education and presents and publishes her research internationally. She co-founded the Center for Intercultural Leadership and Communication at Abington College, has held many leadership positions to advocate for multilingual learners and their families. She earned a BA in French from Ball State University, an MA in Teaching English as a Second Language, and a PhD in Applied Linguistics Speech Communication from the Pennsylvania State University. She has lived in Bucks County for 25 years and facilitates media literacy and intercultural communication workshops in local communities and around the world for teachers, students, and civic organizations, and has taken the time out to be with us today to bring us up to speed. Carla, thank you for coming. Tell us, why is this so important?
Okay, first of all, I'm really honored to be here and to be a part of these conversations. You just, listed the things I've done, and thank you for for that nice introduction. But I was thinking about why am I really here? I bring some expertise, based on my career, of course, but I'm also here as an invested participant in other ways. I'm a citizen of Bucks County. I'm a parent, female, and a long list of different kinds of identities. And yes, I am an educator. So I can't completely separate these things when I'm talking about these issues, but I am going to try to stay focused on sharing with you my perspective from education, from being in the field for 35 years. So I do want to talk just briefly about what I teach and why I think this is, is so important. I began my career working with mostly immigrant students, non-native speakers of English. And so I've taught English as a second language. I now teach social linguistics, intercultural communication. And in all of these classes, my goal is to help students find their voices so that they can participate in their communities. Not to tell them how to participate, but to give them the tools so that they can do that. And in the last 20 years, one of these tools, as we all know, has been media. So media is a very pervasive storyteller, and I started to incorporate more and more media literacy activities into my classes. And now that's become very much a part of what I do and what I talk about in my research and writing. So that's how all of these things kind of converge and why I'm here. So where do we begin? So if you've read the blog, you heard me talking about gag orders and book bans that are taking place across the nation. And currently we have legislation that's been passed in 19 states that puts restrictions on what can be taught in classrooms. And this legislation is targeting topics that are deemed divisive. Some of the proposals actually say you can't, use the word narratives. And all of them are about silencing stories. And right now, 2 bills are proposed in the state legislature in Pennsylvania, one targeting higher education and the other K through 12. And this is just again, it's kind of hard to think about where to begin in talking about these issues. There are different facets of it. First of all, there are freedom of speech, constitutional rights, educational policies. We can look at, the history of public education and the fact that it is supposed to be for everyone, but that parental rights have always been a part of that in all of the discussions. Also, we have to consider that this legislation is partly due to political strategies, that there are attempts being made, and this is nothing new, to kind of create a moral panic around an issue. And this has been done in the past, many different issues, but a moral panic and creating a problem that perhaps doesn't even really exist divides people. It divides people right before an election. So this is a big part of what's being done. And to create a moral panic about an issue, you also have to have an audience that's rather vulnerable. And coming out of the pandemic, and living in a world where parents have to think about things like violence in schools and mental health issues on the increase among adolescents, parents are very vulnerable right now. And it's very natural to want to protect children. So some of this legislation has kind of been posed as this is a way to protect your children. And if you read through it, that's really not the case. So what's happening is that legislation, gag orders, and book bans are vaguely worded, and they're giving, well, in this case, the book bans that just took place in Central Bucks School District are very vaguely I could read like some of the words they use. They say that a book can be banned if any individual, any resident wants to or has any kind of opposition to the book. And this gives power for one person to take a book out of the library in schools. And it also allows for many multiple interpretations. So it says that, I can read part of it here, that books can be removed based on implied or explicit sexual content. So you have the word implied in there. So that can just be interpreted in so many different ways. And this has passed, and it passed despite a lot of opposition at the school board meeting. It passed despite the fact that community members showed up and spoke out against it. A few people were for it, but it was still passed by the school board. And this is not just happening in Central Bucks, it's happening again across the nation. It's happening in Pennsylvania. In 2021, Pennsylvania ranked second in the number of books that were banned. There's a number of like almost 460 books were banned from schools.
Carla, who was first?
Texas.
Oh, goody.
So we rank, second to Texas and the amount of books that we banned. And I did want to mention this. This comes from pen.org, which is in the chat. 41% of the books banned across the nation include protagonists and prominent secondary characters who were people of color. 22% directly address issues of race and racism. 33% explicitly address LGBTQ themes or have protagonists or prominent secondary characters who are LGBTQ+. 16% are history books or biographies. And 16 are history books. Children's books are censored, including biographies of Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, Ruby Bridges, Duke Ellington, the list goes on. And on the Penn website, there's a 25-page spreadsheet listing all the books that have been banned. Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, banned. And again, I was just beside myself looking through that list. And it's just so sad for so many reasons. The first thing I think of is I feel so lucky to have grown up in a house that was always full of books. My parents didn't go to college. They didn't know much about going to college. So in some ways I was disadvantaged being a first generation college student, but I had a house full of books. And not all kids have that, but they should be able to go to school and their classrooms and have a classroom full of books. And I've heard about teachers being afraid of having books in their classrooms right now. And honestly, that just makes me want to cry. The classroom is a place where children should have access to books in the school libraries. Yeah, what were you going to say, Maria?
No, I was just going to ask you, have there been any success in pushing back against this? I mean, I know Penridge had some things about, I'm not sure if it was about book related. I think there was something in York or something about banned books. Has there been any success in pushing back on this that we can learn from?
Not that I have found yet. There has been pushback in terms of, the ACLU threatening a legal suit against Central Bucks. The coalition, there's a National Coalition Against Censorship, and they sent a letter to Central Bucks and other places. So there are people fighting this, and the Central Bucks proposal just passed, so there hasn't been any proposals yet to ban certain books. But
there's nothing we can learn from and say, hey, this worked in Duluth, it could work here.
I haven't gotten that far to find that yet. So yeah, I think that's definitely the direction where we need to go. Oh, the list of banned books I see in the chat, that's on pen.org.
If you scroll up, you can see the link for that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I see other people also naming books. Yes, that have.
So the question was from someone, did it pass because only the school board gets to decide or vote on it? Is there any way we can then make the voters vote on it?
It's the school board who decides, and that's why it passed. So this is why it's so important to vote for school board members and know what they stand for. And because this is, that's exactly what happened. It seems like there was a lot of opposition to it, but despite that opposition, the voices of minority opinion are what's being upheld by the school board.
And the question is, when is the next election of school board members?
You have to look at the district's website, because we just had one, and they're staggered. So I couldn't tell you exactly when, how many members will be up at the next.
We'll look at that and we'll make sure we send that out.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were so many reasons, obviously, to fight this fight, right? And what really draws me to this issue, yes, there are the legalities, the policies, the political aspects of it, but I work with students and they're curious, they're worried, and they're confused, and that's their words. These are what my college students are telling me. Most of all, I love the idea that I just had them, introduce themselves, and they're curious. They want to know things. They want to be able to ask questions, and we're trying to take that out of the classrooms, and we're denying them the opportunity to develop problem-solving skills, decision-making skills, being motivated to participate in their communities. We're kind of taking away this need to be informed, or maybe motivation to want to be informed. And we're going to allow generations of young people just to fall prey to disinformation and propaganda, because some people don't want us to talk about any controversial or divisive topics in classrooms. And you can't do that. We have to prepare students to absolutely confront controversial issues and divisive topics, and to be able to do it in a productive way. Because the only thing that they're learning right now, if they're watching the school board meetings, for example, or spending time on social media, what they're learning is that you attack people, right? You just attack their ideas, you attack who they are, you don't listen, and you simplify and you decontextualize. These are not the lessons that we need to be teaching. We need to teach students, and we all need to be very mindful of contextualizing issues, not just seeing snippets of information and basing our decisions on that. And all of this is part of media literacy. This is why I got into media literacy. This is just giving our young people and ourselves the tools to deal with the onslaught of information that comes at us every day. And if we deny these kinds of opportunities in the classrooms, where are they going to learn this?
Tell me a little bit more about your media literacy education, and what can we do to participate in that? I mean, I definitely, obviously, as you do, see that connection so tight between that and civic engagement.
Yes.
And we, hear everybody say, oh, yes, we need to have more engaged citizenry. Yes, Thomas Jefferson was indeed right.
Yeah.
But tell me about that. How do you make that connection? And most importantly, what can we do?
Okay, media literacy education is something that really does cross all curricular subjects, right? Students today are spending, let me see, what was the very latest, young people are spending 7 to 8 hours a day on social media.
What was that number?
7 to 8 hours.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, here it is. Okay. The average daily usage of social media, this is not being on screens for schooling. This is outside of schooling for tweens is 5 hours and 33 minutes. The average daily time spent on screens for entertainment for teenagers is 8 hours and 39 minutes per day. This is where students are getting their information, which also, makes me think about this focus on books and libraries. And I'm thinking, are the students reading books? If they're spending 8 hours a day watching videos, and out of the 8 hours and 39 minutes, most of it is spent on YouTube videos. So yeah, I'm a definitely advocate for reading, but I think that some of the concern about what students are being exposed to is misdirected, because if they're getting looking at reading books, in classrooms, then they're having guidance with that content. If they're watching videos on their own, who's guiding them? Who are they talking to about what they see? So it's media literacy is a very huge concern. So the media literacy education movement is not about just learning how to use tools. All right, technology is a great tool, and yes, we need to know how to use it. But media literacy is about how to not only consume. It's not just about consuming, but it's about observing, evaluating, analyzing, responding to media. And a big part of that is knowing how to decode the language and imagery. So that's where my classes come in. I teach a lot about language, and we don't separate that completely from imagery, because most of what students see are linguistic landscapes today are not just printed materials, but it's the multimodal materials, multimedia. So we have to look at language and imagery and how it's being used to send messages. And a lot of it is marketing, right? And students are pretty savvy to that. But what they need to get better at, and again, adults too, we all need to constantly be on the lookout for propaganda. And propaganda works when whoever's producing it takes a very complex issue and tries to reduce it to its something that's very easy to digest. So let's any topic. This is what's happened with this idea of this opposition to critical race theory being taught in schools. Well, it's not taught in schools. It really hasn't been, and never in K through 12. But it was just reduced to something that people could react to emotionally. That's what propaganda does. So you had the word critical and race and theory, and all of those are trigger words for people. So there's an emotional response. So by, kind of picking apart messages that are coming to students through media, you help them to become better observers of the world around them. You help them to analyze, you help them to interpret it, and they choose how to respond. It's not about telling them what to believe. It's not about indoctrination. It's about decoding messages. It's about decoding language and imagery.
Carla, can you give us an example to really make that concrete? As far as, have you had students, I'm sure you have, that have had aha moments and said, oh, is there something you can share with us so we can help understand that connection? They saw that and then therefore they chose to do X, Y, or Z.
Okay, well, that's a big question.
Yes.
I don't now with that pressure on, I don't know if I can think of specific examples. I have students do, I can tell you about a project, for example, called I call it linguistic landscapes, and the students go into different contexts depending on the class. So I've done this with teachers and also students in general education courses. So students will walk through neighborhoods and they'll take photographs of signs and things that they see in the neighborhood. So it has to include some text and imagery. And then they'll look at all of those images together and kind of see what kind of narratives are being told. So for example, I can give you an example of, and I also, it's important to know that I define media very broadly. Media, a lot of people think, oh, media, it's everything, you know, it's news and it's digital communication. Yes, it is, but it's books, it's flyers, it's the junk mail that comes to our houses, it's everything. So we have to include analog and digital media. So recently, in the last year or so, I've had pre-service teachers that I've been working with, and they have been doing observations in different schools, and some of them are placed in a dual language school in Philadelphia. So the school's you know, supposed to be equal Spanish and English. So I had them do linguistic landscapes of the schools, taking pictures of, you know, the posters, the flyers, everything around the school. And then we look at the websites and just kind of look for what kind of narratives emerge. So this is, you know, a school that's supposed to be dual language, that is, you know, validating the use of both English and Spanish, and validating the speakers of both languages. And what the students realize after they put all of this together, their photographs, that most of the signs and the important information was in English, and some of the signs actually had Spanish underneath it in smaller font and in parentheses. So they started thinking, oh, wait, that's not really equal. If Spanish is kind of like, oh, just in parentheses, but English is highlighted. So it gets them thinking about everything that they see around them, and they can make changes. Those are things that they can do just by changing a font size of something, right? And in having, why not put Spanish first, right? And these are schools that are mostly Spanish speakers too. So put Spanish first and then English underneath it equally. So a lot of my student projects have to do with like big questions of, are we a multilingual or monolingual nation? And students will come up with, you know, do their linguistic landscapes, and we see that we are multilingual. We allow for languages and different signs in neighborhoods and in an informal context. But in very formal context and schooling, it's English only that's rewarded. So they start to think about these kinds of issues.
I'd like to kind of shift gears just a little bit, because I'm looking at the time and I want to make sure that we end on time. We got a couple questions beforehand. One of them was about that we just addressed with media literacy. Another one is a little bit off from where we've been, but how can high quality early education for 0 to 5-year-olds be encompassed in discussions about high quality public education?
That is the one question that, as I'm not an expert in educational policy, but I think that we just have to start doing that and putting pressure on administrators and people in higher positions to bring pre-K schooling, early childhood development into the conversation. Years ago, I worked with Head Start teachers, and they were so marginalized, and they were doing such important work, and they were so smart, and they were just, you know, in the trailer next to the school working with kids.
Oh.
Yes, yeah. So it's always been hard, I think, to bring that into the conversation. So I don't have an exact answer for that. I do have more information about the other question about
Sure.
media literacy education and how it can be applied to students with special needs. And I wanted to say that there's a Journal of Media Literacy Education, and this is an open access journal, so it's online. And they ran a special issue in 2017 about media literacy and disabilities, and that's full of a lot of really good articles. And I've also had students with disabilities in my classes, and you know, we try to incorporate a lot of universal design in terms of media for the class content, but also the students, when they've done their projects, have looked at, like one example from last year, a student who was visually impaired did like a linguistic landscape. He looked at characters with disabilities and the favorite like comics that he liked, you know. So the students can choose different things that they like, but they look for these communities. There's just a lot of different ways. That's I think one of the wonderful things about media literacy is that students are very interested in it, and you can look at controversial issues, you can talk about controversial issues, and you can do it without forcing students to talk about themselves if they're not ready to do that. They can talk about, I see these characters on TV or these characters in anime, and there's just so many creative things you can do. And then it's also, there's media literacy education. There are a lot of people working on incorporating media literacy activities into classrooms to promote civic engagement. So how do we get students involved in caring about what's going on in their communities? And they start with media literacy education projects. So there's a lot written about that also in the Journal of Media Literacy Education.
Okay, that's great. And it sounds like, to get back to whether they've intellectual disabilities or any of the students that you're teaching in a variety of environments, that just becoming aware gives them that ability to understand better, both as a consumer of media, as well as perhaps, then when they communicate, to know that how they can be more effective as well. Would that be fair?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And there's a lot of different, ways. Everything that you see is, like I said, media. So with younger children, you can start with just, looking at the cover of books. Like, what do you see in these books? Whose faces are there? And it would take, hours and hours to go through all these kinds of But the bottom line is, it's giving students tools to talk about hard things, really hard topics. And if we make it impossible for teachers to create space for these conversations in the classrooms, where's this going to happen? Where are students going to learn? I mean, hopefully they'll learn from their families, but we have to realize that they're in school a large part of the day. And this is an important place for them. And it should be a safe place for them to learn, make mistakes, and be able to express themselves. And when they go home, according to, the statistics, we see a lot of them are spending a lot of time on social media. Right. So we really have to keep our public schools a place for everyone to learn.
So in getting back to the two bills that you're talking about, and then also let's go back to the school board, and thank you, Jane Weston, who tells us that half the school board will be elected next November. So that's good to know. Let me start with that, then we'll end with the bills, because I know that's part of the call to action that we're going to follow up on in the next, in tomorrow's communication with all of you to follow up on this meeting. That is, someone had asked, and I thought it was wonderful, is there one question that we as individuals, as citizens, should ask the candidates for school board?
One question.
In other words, how can we assess them so that we know that they're going to be not in favor of banning books, for example, to just build on the topic we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many issues.
I mean, I assume the answer is no, right? When anybody says, are you in favor of banning books? Everyone say, no, I don't want to ban books.
Yeah. There has to be other ways to get at this. I don't think there's any one question. I think there are several questions that could tap into it. But it could, it could be about how do you feel about students, being able to talk about any issue they need to in the classroom. That's kind of vague, but otherwise I think you get into, a lot of the discussion about these book bans is complaints that they are very much targeting the LGBTQ community. So you could ask a question directed at that if you want to do that. But I think that, I'm sorry. I wish I could, coming up.
No, there's not a magic bullet.
Yeah. That's a great question though. It really is a good question.
I guess we can all participate in that. Anybody who has a good question for the chat, please put it in the chat so we can all learn from it.
Mhm.
You did mention about the two proposed, the House Bill 1532 and Senate Bill 1278.
Right.
That are putting restrictions on free speech. You said one at the college level, one at the K to 12 level.
Mhm.
What can be done about those?
Um,
What do you want us to know and do?
Well, I'm keeping an eye on them in terms, they're both pending. So I don't know exactly, when they'll be put to vote. And then there's also possibility of veto, right, by the governor. But we need to write to our politicians and tell them not to support this. And these things are worded so vaguely that there's sentences like you cannot engage students in academic discussions that impose your own beliefs. So a teacher can't impose their beliefs. Well, what do you mean by imposing? You mean you can't share your beliefs? I don't use my classroom as a political platform, but the fact that I'm teaching about language is that's obviously imposing my values, because teaching is not a neutral activity. So the fact that I choose to teach and work with marginalized populations and English language learners, and the fact that I have spent most of my career working with low-income students, all of those say something about my values. So how do I teach and strip all of that away? And anything that I say in the classroom, somebody could take as me, imposing my beliefs. And that's really dangerous. That's going to silence me as a teacher. How am I going to teach? I'll be afraid to talk, because my school, the threats are in a lot of these pieces of legislation, not so far in Pennsylvania, but if you look at Penn's website, they'll show the penalties, and some of the penalties are, teachers being fired, schools losing accreditation. These are very serious, penalties targeted at teachers. So we're already, we have a teacher shortage, and so we have to we have to really put pressure on our legislators to not pass this.
And as I mentioned, I'm going to just pop this on the call to action that's going to be coming tomorrow, I believe, from IFE, is going to address those issues. So we'll keep an eye out for those. And Carla, of course, we ask you to please keep us in touch with what's going on so that we can spread the net and share that information broadly. Is there anything else we haven't touched on? And again, we're just kind of giving a look to the clock here. I know there's a lot we haven't talked about, but is there anything else that you want to make sure that we end with, or that you reinforce?
So many things.
Yes. Anything we missed? Any big hole?
Yeah, I don't think we missed any big holes. I think the important thing is that we are all invested in this. It's not just people who have, a child in the schools. Everyone is invested in this, because if we don't, if we're trying to take away our young people's opportunities to solve problems and make good decisions and be informed, that's a tragedy. They're already facing a world where there are so many issues that they need to deal with, right? It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming for all of us. And we want to, strip away their opportunities to tackle these issues. That hurts, And so we are all invested in this. All of our futures are invested together in this.
Okay, well, I thank you so much. And we're going to follow this up with, of course, the call to action tomorrow. And we're also going to try to capture a lot of this discussion. We'll, of course, have the link to this video for everyone to share. And I'll also put together a short review of it that'll be available on our website as well, so that you can you can also share it. And that's the idea, is to make sure we share it and go forward, and we'll get you all the information you need, in particular about Central Bucks School District as well. So I just want to thank you again, Carla, for participating, and share some other gratitude as well. I want to thank ARP for sponsoring this episode. Thank you to the Board of Directors for the Bucks County Women's Advocacy Coalition and the issue specialists who volunteer their time to follow issues such as education so closely and to track the legislation. You can see how important it is and the important work that Carla has been doing as well. Thank you to all who joined us this afternoon for keeping it brief, and all the supporters of the coalition. As you know, we try to speak with one voice and make that voice really powerful. The election's coming up in November, so please visit bcwac.org, the coalition website, to follow what we're doing, to get the answers on any topics you're interested in, so you know where things stand and what you need to worry about before you go into the booth. And a very special thank you to Dr. Carla Chamberlin for sharing all of your expertise and your interest and your excitement and your passion for education and children with us today, and all the work you do every day to help bring about the systemic change that will make life better and fairer for families in Bucks County and all of Pennsylvania. I really thank you. So we'll be back together next month. It'll be October 5th. Wednesday again at 1:30 to 2:15. And on that day, we will have all 3 county commissioners as our guests. So bring your questions, bring your colleagues, bring your friends, bring your neighbors, because they need to hear from you. You need to hear from them. Thank you all very much for joining us today. And thank you very much, Carla. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.